Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Joe. I'm just going to quickly run through the safety evacuation in this room, which is Franklin Auditorium. Right, what will happen if there is an emergency in this room? An alarm will be raised through the speakers that are in the room. Once you hear the alarm, that will then mean you've got to vacate the room immediately. In this room, there is 4 exit doors. There is the main door that you use to come in. There is a door behind the pillar on my left, and one at the far right of the room, and one behind me. All these doors are open. You can use any of these doors to go out. But before you leave your room, what you need to check is amongst you, if there's any persons living with disability, those people get helped first. Thereafter, everybody can just leave the room. For those that would have used the doors on my right, what you do, you just push the door open, follow the passage until you get to the end of it, where you will find another glass door. Open it as well. On the other side of the door, there will be a safety officer who will then walk you to the nearest assembly point. On this side of the building, the nearest assembly point is on the east of the building. What you will then do, you will be led down the staircase, go through the security checkpoint. Opposite the building, on the green grass, there is a big sign that says assembly point number 2. We can all assemble there. And for those that would have used the doors on my left, you just go out and immediately go down the staircase to follow those that would have used the other doors. However, should what affect this room affect the bottom part, what will then happen, you'll be stopped at the staircase, you will be led back into the main building. As soon as you come to the passage area of the main building, you turn right, go through the security checkpoint at the top, go through the open parking lot. Opposite the bus station by the left side, there is another sign that says assembly point number 1. You can also assemble there. Whilst you all gather at the assembly point, whether it's the one down here or the one at the top, what we then do, we take all the attendance registers, we do a roll call based on the names that are assigned to make sure that everybody that came out of this room is accounted for. Are there any concerns from anybody? We're all clear where to go. Thank you very much. Enjoy yourselves.
Thank you, Mr. Pagati. Without much ado, I'm going to call upon the chairman, Mr. Zatembe Khoza, to give us the opening remarks.
Thank you, Kulu. Interim Chief Executive, Mr. Dladla, members of the media, Eskom executives and staff, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. Eskom has originally planned to release its annual financial results on the 11th of July 2017. I would like to apologize on behalf of the board for the cancellation of the announcement at a short notice. The postponement was triggered by our auditors, Sizwe and Saluba Koboto, submission for the qualified opinion. It was prudent for Eskom to ensure that we assess the impact, if any, on our financial agreements. I would like to assure you that as we sit here today, we are not concerned that there is a direct impact on our financial agreements, hence the decision to go ahead and make an announcement today. In such a volatile year, Eskom has realized admirable operational and financial results. As it is faced with formidable reputational challenges, in other words, of Charles Dickson, it was the best of times, it was worst of times. Close quotes. On the 23rd June 2017, the Honorable Minister of Public Enterprises, Lynn Brown, appointed a new acting board to steer this proudly South African company, a duty we each accepted with resolve to save and restore reputation of the 94-year-old icon in the interest of South Africans. As newly appointed board, albeit the acting, we recognize and acknowledge that the leadership stability and the governance assurance are essential if this has. In the past week, the board conducted a two-day induction section where we review the annual integrated results and recognize the strides made by the executive management in stabilizing and re-energizing Eskom business for long-term sustainability, and the results that will be published here today. The company has achieved above-target financial performance over the past year, despite a challenging external environment. The performance reflects a concrete effort by the business to improve efficiencies, resulting in a cost reduction, increased border cross-sales, support by improved plant performance. We recognize the substantial business productivity saving of about 20.2 billion. Equipped with surplus capacity, a sustainable capital investment plan, and a healthy liquidity profile, Eskom financial position is one of a trajectory of continual improvement. Positive progress was made in securing external funding for its capital project, with 77% of the funding secured to date. The commitment by and the support of the government to the extent that the government guarantee framework agreement was extended from the 31st March 2017 to 31st March 2023 are greatly welcomed. It remains pleasing for all the South Africans that at the operational fronts, Eskom has not implemented the load shedding for the past 23 months and will continue to implement appropriate levels of planned maintenance to ensure long-term plant reliability. The reduction in unplanned outages contributes to improve in the plant availability and the result sharp reduction in the usage of the diesel generators. Eskom's new build program is delivering results with a total of 2,920 megawatts following the Medupi, Kusile, and the Ngula pump station to the national grid, powering homes, factories, farms, and businesses in South Africa and the region. A notable achievement of the design-to-cost strategy, beside the surplus capacity, is that 79% plant availability, a step away from realizing the generation sustainability target of 80% plant availability. The move from a constrained power system to surplus capacity is a result of improved generation plant performance, unit from our new build program being commissioned, and independent power producers being included in our mix. Eskom is now open to supporting new investments in South Africa and across the borders. Additionally, noteworthy achievements that have gone under the radar in the media include the 207,000 South Africans who have for the first time been connected to the grid and can experience the comfort of electricity as Eskom accelerated its electrification program, including more than 800,000 South Africans whose lives have been positively enriched through the company's corporate social investment initiatives. Despite these results, the board notes with concern the qualified audit relating to the compliance with regard to public finance management regulation, which is the PFMA, and the completeness of irregular expenditure, and the two reportable irregularities that were raised by Eskom external auditors. It's worth noting that the board has taken adequate steps to the satisfaction of the auditors that irregularities have been mitigated to an acceptable level. Management has shared plans to facilitate improvement in relating to the qualified audit. The board has impressed upon the executive team that issues raised will demand special attention and oversight going forward. I would like to talk to a few matters that have been of interest. I would like to talk to a few matters that have been of interest to the public recently. The investigation on Mr. Koko, who used to be an acting chief executive officer, and the alleged conflict of interest as it relates to Impulse International, has been completed. The board has taken a decision to pursue disciplinary action against Mr. Koko, and this will follow a normal labor relations process. The Minister of Public Enterprise has been informed of this decision. The Tegeta Arbitration Award was finalized at 577 million. As you will know, in the arbitration process, parties will come up with their own figures, but ultimately the arbitrator decides on the settlement figure. While we will not normally disclose the award figures, we have decided to do so in the interest of openness. Finally, on Mackenzie Tegeta contract, Eskom has decided to commission an independent review to focus on Trillion's role at Eskom in particular and other consulting firms in general around the consulting work performed for the company. Trillion was a subcontractor to Mackenzie, South Africa, when Eskom was requested to pay them directly. The total amount that was paid to Trillion was 495 million, and Mackenzie was paid about 900 million, with a total value of the master service agreement to the value of 1.4 billion. We nevertheless congratulate the interim group Chief Executive Officer, Mr. Johnny Dladla, Eskom executives, and the employees of their achievement over the past year. Despite the circumstances, all of you have worked steadily with a dedication that I can only admire. I thank you all for what you have done. Your commitment to Eskom, your future efforts in the interesting times ahead of us. Through our collective abilities, that of our shareholder, Eskom executives and employees, we remain resolute to restore Eskom as a jewel of the nation and create a better environment and society for all. Failure is not an option. I thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Chair. And for more information on the results in terms of how we have performed in the 2016-17 financial year, we now call upon our interim CEO, Mr. Johnny Dladla, to give us more details.
Good morning to everyone. Good morning. Colleagues, it gives me pleasure to welcome all of you, and thanks to the program director, Kulu, chairman of the Eskom board, Mr. Koza, members of the Eskom board who are present here today, the Deputy Director General of DPE, Ms. Makola Makololo, the Chief Executive Officer of NESA, Mr. Chris Foley, officials of the Department of DPE and DOE who are here, members of the media, Eskom executives and staff, ladies and gentlemen. I just thought, before I kick off with the results, this is first public appearance. And I was telling my colleagues that there's normally a return policy on products after 21 days. So I've been in the job for 21 days, and I thought to myself, maybe I just have to redeem myself to check if I need to continue and if the buyer is still happy with the product. So I'm sharing with yourselves what we've been doing in the past 21 days. I'll kick off just by sharing with yourselves what I've observed in the organization, and also sharing with you some of the actions I've taken so far. I believe that business deals with its headwinds, and that in itself it's a determiner of its future success. And most importantly, it also assures us of sustainability. When looking at these results, we're talking about numbers of the previous year, but it will also help to give comfort in terms of where are we as an organization, and if there's any reason to worry moving forward as an organization. The results will reveal how we are positioning ourselves to emerge from the current challenges, and also sharing with you how we're planning to move towards the future. Our Honorable Minister and the shareholder representative, Ms. Lynn Brown, on my appointment, she handed me and the board an unambiguous focal areas, which included, amongst others, leadership cohesion within Eskom. She also emphasized on contract management. She highlighted her concerns around coal procurement and the conflict of interest. She expects nothing else but unvarnished appraisals and performance across all the stated areas. I must also highlight the fact that the board's own focal areas, by and large, reinforces these areas that the minister has highlighted. My commitment is without any shadow of doubt, and to this end, with all the requisite support that I've received, I can comfortably state that I will strive to meet those expectations with our shareholder representative. In a few meetings that I've had with the team in the past 3 weeks, I've had no less than 5 executive committee meetings. And the request I've made to EXCO is that there'll be no decisions that will be taken outside the executive committee meetings, which means that whatever decision is taken, it will be a decision that is documented and we've applied our minds on it. There'll be no decisions that are taken in some corners or by individuals without having been debated and decided on by the executive committee. I have hammered on the areas that the minister has shared, that there'll be total focus on macro governance. This is now across Eskom operations. The issue around the declaration of interest, which links to governance and ethics, the conflict of interest, if not expressed, what are the consequences, the perceived corruption and other pertinent issues which we mean to improve and will also help in our overall performance. I have, in the 3 weeks, already engaged also with the guardians, the Eskom guardians. I've had 3 sessions from the 9 provinces, and I've expressed the same commitment, and I've also asked them as to what it is that they expect of us. And I will continue engaging with organized labor, and continuing also to engage with organized business leaders I have already spoken to quite a few of the organized labor leadership. We had the suppliers yesterday with us. This is also in sharing with them our expectation. Tomorrow I will be meeting with the electricity intensive user group. You may be asking yourself, why is he sharing all of these? It is my belief that unless I have a commitment within Eskom, there's no point in rushing out and raising all sorts of expectations when I've got a limping a staff force. And that came as a result of a number of issues. We had almost a month without CEO. That didn't mean that the business wasn't running. However, it does raise a lot of uncertainties and a lot of questions. And it is for me to reassure them of the commitments that this organization has, not only to Eskom, but to the country as a whole. Now, for me to be able to build that confidence within and externally, I will continue to pursue aggressively the 5 priority initiatives which are in our corporate plan. And these relate to growing the local sales by 2.1% and looking at 8% for the cross-border sales. We're looking at optimizing the CAPEX by 65 billion rands. We're looking at using technology to start chasing the savings, and the target that we have is 14.1 billion. We're also looking at reducing our primary energy expenses by 53 billion. And lastly, it is our ambition as well to release about 105 billion in government guarantees. And that will also start ensuring that we focus on the sustainability of this business. I just thought I'll share with you upfront where my head is and what I have been focusing on in the last 3 years. And all of this I'll be able to do if I also get enough headroom in carrying out what I've been tasked to do. If you may allow me, I'll present to you our integrated results, and I hope that I have managed to give you a sense of where I've been in the past 21 days and where I'm planning to be to carry out my duties. Our results, I'll be covering 4 areas, actually mainly 3. This is the overview of the year that has gone past, and I'll also look at the financial performance, and then the operating performance. In terms of the progress on the turnaround plan as of last year, we have managed to continue to produce positive results. There's continued improvement in the generation performance. The new build program is delivering to plan. The financial profitability and liquidity has been restored. The surplus capacity currently exists and is projected to grow steadily over the next 3 years as we deliver on our build program. If you look at the financial performance, there has been an increase of 14.4% on the EBITDA. We achieved an EBITDA of 38 billion rand against the target of 30 billion. The revenue increased by 7.9% to 177 billion. The own generation cost decreased by 8.5% to 60 billion, with total primary energy cost down by 2.3%. The cash generated from operating activities, it increased by 23.1% to 46 billion. On cost savings, we achieved 20 billion against a target of 17 billion. 53% of funding for 2018 has been secured. Looking into the operational performance, the generation plant performance has improved significantly last year from 71.1% to 77.3%. The Medupi Unit 5 was synchronized, achieving a commercial operation on the 3rd of April, giving us about 794 megawatt installed capacity. Medupi Unit 4 was synchronized end of May in this year. Gusile Unit 1 was also synchronized to the grid last year, the 26th of December, achieving a full load of 800 megawatts by the end of March this year. All the Ingula units are in commercial operation, adding about 1,332 megawatts in terms of installed capacity. We've managed to construct about 585 kilometers of lines, which then also helped to us commissioning 2,300 MVA transformers. We also managed to complete the 665 kV network to the Western Cape. Just continuing with the key highlights, focusing on the socio-economic performance, the chairman has already highlighted that over 200,000 households were electrified last year, which also allowed for 90% of the universal access in the country. We procured from the BBBE compliant suppliers 98%, which was an improvement from the previous year of 82%. We spent with black-owned suppliers 41%, improving from 34% that was achieved the previous year. The local content contracted from the new build program was 86%. Procurement from black women-owned suppliers improved from 12% to 15%. The employment of female employees in senior management positions increased from 28% to 37%. Moving into the financial performance, as you can see that we managed to achieve and exceed on all the KPIs that were targeted. I've already highlighted earlier on that we have improved on the revenue by 7.9%. The EBITDA, we achieved 38 billion, which was a 14.4% improvement. Cash from operations, 46 billion rand, 23% up from previous years. And own primary energy cost was reduced by 5.6 billion. When you look at the key financial ratios, as you can see that there's been also a significant improvement. When looking at the income statement, I've covered most of the areas. In terms of overall electricity sales, we saw an improvement on the cross-border sales, a growth of 12.1%. This was due to the drought in our neighboring countries and being able to supply them because of the surplus capacity. We also saw an increase in the commercial sector of about 1.9%. However, we saw a decline in the industrial sector of 3.7%, and this was also due to some of the ferrochrome industries either shutting down or delaying some of their production. The agricultural sector, we saw a decline of 5.7%, and again, with the drought, we found that farmers were not pumping as much as they normally do, and again that then impacted on the use of electricity in that sector. Overall electricity sales volumes declined by 0.2%, with local sales declining by 1%. If you look at the primary energy costs, when you analyze them, we realize a 2.3% decrease from 2016. But you can see the positive contribution there being the less utilization of the diesel for the open cycle gas turbines. A figure of 8.4 billion that we used to spend, we spent almost 340 million last year. Our generation cost decreased by 8.5% from 66 billion to 60 billion. If you look at the renewable IPP cost, there was an increase of 35%, and this was at an average cost of 2,090 per megawatt hour. In terms of our financial position, I'll focus on the debt, securities, and borrowings. That is a huge number that I would like to draw attention to, which is about 355 billion. On the area debt and debtors aging, we continue to have a challenge, and last year the area debt by the municipalities, including interest, it increased from 6 billion to 9.4 billion. We had payment arrangements that were signed with 60 municipalities, 20 of them fully honoring the payment arrangements and 11 partially honoring them. During the year, we connected about 15,000 split meters that were installed in Soweto and Kagiso, and 13,000 of those were converted to prepaid meters. We had smart meters that were installed in Midrand and Sandton. This is a program that we term SMS, which is Soweto, Midrand, and Sandton, where we're installing smart meters, and 14,000 of those were converted to prepaid meters. In terms of funding for this financial year, 53% of funding was secured. Just moving into operating performance, there has been an improved generation operating performance. If you look at our EAF, it improved to 77.3% from 71.1% the previous year. The unplanned breakdowns reduced from 14.9% in 2016 to 9.9% in 2017. Both Quebec units set performance records. We reduced, as mentioned earlier on, the reliance on the OCGTs with a total of 340 million spent on diesel compared to the 8.7 billion that was spent in 2016. There's been a total of 13.2 million tons coal transported by rail. This is in line with the previous year. Since inception, a total of 5,027 megawatts of IPPs were connected to the grid, with 3,110 of renewables. In terms of network performance, transmission performance for system minutes, it also showed improvement, which was less than one of 3.8 minutes against a target of 3.8. No major incidents occurred during this year. The distribution network performance measured in terms of SAIFI and SID remains within the acceptable limits. In terms of the new capacity being brought to my left for the financial year 2015 to financial year 2017, 3,020 megawatts were commissioned since 2015, and 9,157 megawatts commissioned since 2005. For the financial year 2018 to 2022, we have 7,970 megawatts to be commissioned over the next 5 years during that period. Some other key operational performance in terms of our safety performance, the LTIR, which excludes the occupational disease, it worsened from 0.27 in 2016 to 0.28 in 2017. This, however, was still within the target. Be as it may, we are aiming for zero harm to our people, our contractors. So whatever the figure is, if there's still somebody that is hurt or there's fatality, that for us, it's not what we are aiming for. In terms of the fatalities, we had employee and contractor fatalities. That was reduced, but one fatality is one too many. So we continue to focus on safety. For the relative particulate emissions, it improved to 0.30 kilogram per megawatt hour sent out. On the water consumption, we've reduced to 1.42 liter per kilowatt hour. Moving into the area that has been a concern for a long time within Eskom, that of our assets being either vandalized or cables being stolen. This has been classified as a high-value crime that we are targeting. We were successful last year to achieve almost 235 arrests of those individuals that were found to be committing the crime. Progress was also made in terms of arresting the syndicates that are targeting the Eskom network and infrastructure. Still continue on the operational performance. Looking at the socio-economic, we spent about 225 million on our corporate social investment, and this has benefited about 842,000 beneficiaries, which compared to the previous years, this has been up by 178%. Procurement from the BBBE compliant suppliers as a percentage, we achieved 98.3%. If you look at the procurement that was achieved using the local content, we achieved 73.4% compared to the 75.2% the previous year. I've already highlighted the number of homes that were connected last year. In terms of human resources performance, 2.9% of our employees are people with disability. This is still a challenge, and we're focusing on improving on this. And speaking to organized labor, this is one also area that we are expected to be helping people living with disability. And it's a focus that for quite a while, it's not going to be out of our purview. In terms of racial equity in senior management, we achieved 65.8%, and in professional and middle management, achieved 73.5%. There's been good progress made with gender equity in senior management of 36.6%, and in professional and middle management of 36%. In conclusion, I'd like to reiterate my opening remarks that what I'll be pursuing and pushing quite aggressively is ensuring that there's cohesion at a leadership level within Eskom. This will start addressing a number of issues that we've been faced with within the organization. What we intend doing is also making sure that the design to cost strategy, which informs our corporate plan, it's driven quite aggressively, because those targets that I was sharing with yourselves, unless there's a focus on that, it may just become a nightmare for us. But strongly will be also focus on governance, ethics and accountability from all areas within the business. I'll continue engaging with the stakeholders both within and outside Eskom, which will also help in terms of being second-guessed or people having perceptions about certain activities that are not properly communicated, both within and outside the organization. We'll continue to improve our communication as well, because at times that's what leads to speculations and a whole host of things being written if there's no one accessible to engage with people that require information from our side. I'd like to conclude on this slide and trust that I have managed to share with you the history of what happened last year and sharing with you where we're going as an organization. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Ladla. We are now into the time, I'm sure, that all of us were waiting for, where you just need maybe to clarify issues, or maybe if you have pressing questions, then you have the opportunity to ask the panel. Not only do we have the executives here, we also have some of the board members who will be able to answer your questions. So the way we're going to do it is the normal process. You identify yourself and the organization you represent. And if possible, at least for this round, just limit your questions to 2. We'll have another round where you are able to ask more questions. I'm going to start on my left. I'll start with Justin. And then I'll gravitate to the right. I'm going to start here, right here at the front. I note you, Ted. We'll come back to you. We'll take Carol, and then we will take Xolani. For now, we'll take those 3, and then, yeah, starting with you, Justin.
Thank you. Justin Brown from City Press. Just wanted to ask, regarding the surplus that you're selling to the rest of Southern Africa, what price are you selling the power for, and how does it compare with the price that you're selling power to in the local market on average? And then it was mentioned during the presentation that the surplus, Eskom surplus, would continue to increase for the next 3 years. What is your expected peak level of surplus over the next 3 years? Thank you.
Thank you, Justin. I'm sorry, I didn't recognize you, honorable member. I'll come back to you. Carol?
Hi, thank you. It's Carol Payton from Business Day. I think to Mr. Ladla, the arbitration award with Tegeta and Optimum, we were told, we were promised that this is never going to be forgiven, the 2 billion rand fine is never ever going to be forgiven, and that the new owners will have to pay that 2 billion rand fine. What prompted you to change your minds on that? And can you also just please repeat the number exactly? I didn't quite get it. And then the second issue, I think, for Mr. Khoza, if you are so concerned about governance, which everyone here has said they are, why is it that Mr. Singh has not been suspended so that he could be investigated and the allegations around him cleared?
Xolani at Power FM. I'd just like a question to Mr. Ladla to explain the pension issue surrounding Mr. Brian Molefe. I know the matter, we all know the matter is before court, but we just wanted to find out if he is eligible or not eligible for a pension of that size. And secondly, to Mr. Khoza, this particular one of the matter of Mr. Koko, what exactly did your investigation found? You said just that you're going to pursue disciplinary action against him, but what did you find? What allegations or charges are you leveling against him? Thank you.
For now, we'll take those as the first round. We'll go for another round. Mr. Dladla?
Thanks. On the price to on the cross-border sales versus the SA average, if I can get Deva to answer.
Thank you, Johnny. In terms of our sales, we have various contracts with various countries, and the price is obviously dependent on the volume that we sell. But just to give you a good indication, we normally sell at the highest price that we normally charge here, which is Megaflex. So all our prices are Megaflex and higher. So that's basically, because of the confidentiality agreements, that's the best indication I can give. That excludes, obviously, the special pricing agreement we have with Motraco, which is a different contract.
You might just as well, Deva, cover the expected peak next year.
So in terms of, we've got
in the next 3 years.
The surplus. So in terms of the surplus capacity, it varies, it's seasonal. So obviously during the summer months, the surplus is much higher because you have less demand. During winter, the surplus actually grows. So even during winter, anytime in the evenings, you have a surplus of up to 3,000. Off-peak, you have far bigger surplus. It all depends on the growth we see in the country over the next 3 years. If there's no growth, and we continue seeing a negative growth, that surplus will go between 3,000 to 5,000 megawatts and continue to grow even beyond that. So we have to manage that, and how we manage that is obviously it's a function of your maintenance. Generation will have to do a bit more maintenance, and you may have to look at putting some of the units into coal reserve. That's typically how we measure more surplus, but it's very difficult to give an exact number. It's a function of the growth.
On the question of arbitration award, I'll ask the chair to give the number. You requested what the figure was, Chair.
On Tegeta matter, the arbitration award, the final one was 577 million. And I'll ask Mr. Singh to give you the details of the reason why we have reached a settlement.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think the position that we start in is to establish why the 2.1 million was put out in the public domain in the first place. The 2.1 million followed a letter of demand that was issued by Eskom. 2.1 billion that was issued, a letter of demand that was issued by Eskom to Optimum at the time. And you will recall that the 2.1 billion was accumulated over a number of years. And I think it was dating far back as 2012. And the letter of demand was meant to basically keep the claim alive, else it would prescribe over that period of time. In terms of the subsequent process, the subsequent process was an arbitration process that was entered into between Tegeta as well as Eskom. It is a contractually provided for mechanism to resolve disputes. And I'm given to understand that an arbitration process was attempted between Eskom as well as the previous owners of Optimum as well. The arbitration process is no different to any other legal process. The evidence has to be provided, it has to be legally acceptable. There's an arbitrator that sits, and in this case it was a senior counsel that arbitrated over the process. And you would need to lead evidence. And Eskom went into this process and obtained senior counsel opinions on its position relating to the claim, and felt that it was best to be in a position to settle the claim. And the reasons for that was the underlying nature that gave rise to the claim. Remember, the underlying nature of the claim was that Eskom was disputing coal qualities that were being received from the Optimum mine at the time, which dated back to 2012. One of the reasons that we've identified as to the reason for the poor coal qualities was the sampling equipment that actually had to be changed, I think, in 2010. And the change of the sampling equipment in 2010 was a different design than the original sampling equipment that was installed at the mine. And the reason for the sampling equipment to have been changed in 2010 was because the other sampling plant had come to the end of its useful life. The new design incorporated a element of equipment that was not in the previous sampling plant. And this thing was called a crusher, as I'm given to understand. And this crusher increased the I don't know what you want to call it, the reject coal that was put into the sampling plant. And that basically gave a false positive in terms of the quantity of reject coal that was then being recorded under the contract. Obviously, I'm giving you now the outcome of the investigations that happened over a period of 3 to 4 years. The reason why the coal 2.1 billion then grew up to 2.1 billion was because during that period of time when we were investigating the cause for these rejections was the contract actually is quite punitive, and to the extent that poor quality coal is delivered over a period of more than 1 week, you basically, the contract reverts to a 1 rand a ton delivery rate. So that was the reason why the amount ramped up so quickly. After the entire investigation and 3 years later and so on and so forth, and we understood that the crusher was the problem, obviously the optimum owners at the time disputed the claim. Eskom obviously thought that it could enforce the claim, and that process continued for the 3 years. That then led to the letter of demand being issued, and then when we went into the arbitration process, obviously we understood the reasons underlying why the claim was being disputed by Optimum at the time. We understood that we had sufficient information to make us comfortable that the crusher was creating a false positive, and therefore we went into a settlement process. The 2.1 billion was the full, well, let's say it's the full value of the claim. About 1.1 billion or so of that related to this, let's call it false positive element, which means there was about 1.1 billion that was left over. 577 million of that is around 50% of that value. The contract manager believed that excluding the crusher issue, the claim would have been in the region of about 700 million. So if you take 700 million over the 600 million, that's almost around 75 to 80% of the value of the claim. And that is the basis on which we believe that that was a reasonable amount for us to have settled with together.
The question from Kolane on the pension on Mr. Mlife, this is the matter that it's with the courts. There has been a number of debates around it, and as such, until that process has been finalized, I'm unable to give you an answer. Chairman, you may wish to address the COCO findings.
Okay. In terms of the findings on the COCO matter, the investigation was based on the conflict of interest. So the charges will be around the conflict of interest and also the fiducial responsibility as the head of the divisions, as some of the contracts happened within his own environment.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, leadership. We'll go for the second round of questions. I'm going to start with my left again. I recognize the lady in black.
Sorry, Kulu, there's one last question. I'd like to give it to the chairman. That is the focus on governance and why is Mr. Singh still here?
All right.
Definitely, we are focusing on the governance, and we try to be fair also to our employees. We look at the matters that were of interest that were pertaining to Mr. Singh. One was the prepayment to Tegeta, and the second one was the arbitration that was mentioned. The other one was the MSA contract. If you look at the prepayment was driven from the division or from the organization, which is Generation, which is what was running short of coal at the time, up to the level where it was taken to the board. The only involvement of Mr. Singh was because of the BTC members at the board that requested him to come in and look at a business case, because at the time, if we were not going to buy those coal, we were going to result to a load shedding or the use of diesel. So he was going to calculate the value of the diesel versus the use of coal at the time, which he gave us the positive variance, and hence the thing went ahead. And the second thing that was going to look at, say, if we pay them upfront, what securities will we have if in case then they can't deliver the coal? Then he was going to secure the what do you call, surety on it, where he looks at the different options, and at the end of the day, we had to even contract in terms of taking the ownership or share in an organization. And I think those matters, it was not him initiated the prepayment, it was initiated at the business, and the submission was done at the business level. So we saw no need for him to be affected at that particular level. And in terms of the arbitration was done by the head of legal and the operations as well, which were giving the information. He only signed the document as a finance head because the payment was going to be done. On the MSA contract with McKinsey and Trillion, what we picked it up, that contract was in place before he came in. And the transaction that took place, some of them took place during his time and some of them before he came in. And he helped us because at the end of the day, when there were a dispute between the McKinsey and the Trillion and the way that it was going to be assessed, he helped us to terminate it as well. So far, with the matters that has been raised within our own environment that we went and looked at it, there is nothing that warrant to that degree that it could be suspended.
Thank you, Chair. It looks like we covered most of those questions. We can go for the second round. I recognize you, so then after you it will be Paul, and then I'll go for Terence, and then maybe let me increase it to 4, and then I'll go for, I think it's Paul, just before Terence, yeah. I'll come to other people afterwards.
Hello, my name is Pauline van Wyk. I'm with Daily Maverick. Mr. Khoza, I want to ask, can you please, because I'm confused, can you please explain to me the Trillion and McKinsey situation? In May this year, you told us, and Fin24 specifically in this instance, and after Mail and Guardian and Amabungani published, details of this contract, that no cent, that's a direct quote, no cent was paid to them. And now suddenly we hear 900 million to Trillion, and McKinsey got 400 million. And also I'm confused about how a subcontractor got 900 million and the actual tenderer got 400 million. And then while you are on my second question, while you told us that you would want the leadership to be accountable and that you want to focus on ethics and governance, I want to know from Mr. Singe, I have in my possession invoices of the Oberoi Hotel, where the Guptas have paid for you to stay in December 2015 and in February to March 2015. The amounts that they paid for you to stay in Dubai were about 18,300 dirham at the one stage and 20,000 at the other. Those included things like spa massages at about 10,000 rand. I also want to ask you, how did it come that these dates coincide with the Tegeta Optimum acquisition? And how did it happen that the Guptas, just a year before, in June 2014, opened a shelf company in Dubai for you and deposited over 400,000 dirham in it?
Thank you, Polly. Just to remind everyone, please, if you can limit your questions to at least 2 at a time, and then we can do the other rounds. Paul?
Yes, for Mr. Dlala, if you could elaborate on, I think you mentioned something about reduction of, at least the intention of the reduction of government guarantees. Does that mean that Eskom is not going to sign the IPP agreements for renewable energy? And I mean, otherwise, can you just address what Eskom plans to do on those IPPs at this point? Also, in terms of the arbitration agreement, when is Tegeta to pay this amount that's been settled? And also, can you address whether there's been a cash, is there a cash shortage at Eskom? Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Terence?
Terence Creamer, Engineering News. Just on the status of your tariff application at the moment, we have had the Supreme Court of Appeal ruling, which post-dated your initial approach to NERSA, which may open up the approaches on RCAs. But I've also heard that there might be a constitutional court application there. So if you could just give us some status update. Is it a pure one-year application? And what happens if NERSA rejects your request for condonation to deviate from the methodology? And then secondly, I just wanted to get some clarity. Got the money from the Chinese Development Bank. If you could just clarify the difference there. Is it just the post-year end issue? And also, are you in breach of any of your covenants at the moment with some of your lenders? And if so, what is the risk of loans being recalled? And then if you could just elaborate on your funding plan for this current year. Thank you.
Thank you. Terence, if you can pass it on to Philip.
Philip de Wet from the Mail and Guardian. Gentlemen, may we please as a nation have from each of you individually a clear and unambiguous answer. Is Eskom in financial distress as defined by the Companies Act? If each of you could just put that on record, that would put our minds at ease. Thank you. Secondly, Mr. Singh, your explanation on the arbitration award is extraordinary, sir. At what point did you personally know that the amount will be reduced? Did you at any time sit next to Brian Molefe when he said to us time and time again that Eskom will hold the company to 2 billion rand in fines? Did you mislead us by not disclosing that at the time?
Thank you, Philip. Mr. Dlala?
On the question of trillion, the numbers, the 900 million that was mentioned, Chair, you mentioned it towards its McKinsey, and 400 million was trillion. Okay, so it's just a swap of the numbers. And your question is around, there was a statement from Eskom that no cent was spent on them. Chair.
Even though maybe I will not comment on the previous statement, but on our investigation, that what we found is that Trillion was paid 495 million, and McKinsey was paid 900 million. But the issue that happened here is that we did not have a contract with Trillion ourselves. It was a subcontractor for McKinsey. Therefore, if you were searching using the contract, you could not pick up any payment. I don't know whether that one led to misleading the people that gave the information or not. However, I will ask the business that we're answering those questions, if that is, how can they add value on the question?
Chair, if I may add, to save time, the Trillion matter as it is now, just taking offers, I asked for that whole transaction to be reviewed. I've asked for an independent review on it because I'm asking myself questions as well. I've called in the main contractor, which was McKinsey. I've suspended them whilst I'm doing this exercise because there was work that was done in terms of confirming that Trillian did deliver work under McKinsey, but they were not contracted to Eskom. So the exercise that I've engaged on, it will help me to understand as well as to that relationship and what value did Eskom get out of that. But McKinsey is not on our premises as I'm talking to you now. On the question of, I think Mr. Singh, you're the only one that can share around the trips.
Thank you, John. Thank you for the question, ma'am. Yes, I think certainly it's something that I've been dealing with in the last couple of weeks, and I will certainly be in a position in the next couple of weeks to prepare. I'm in the process of preparing a document that I will be sharing with the board, the minister, the Portfolio Committee on Public Enterprises, as well as SCOPA, relating to those matters. So I will ask that the board as well as media give me some time to be able to complete the document, and once it is complete, we will share that with all the relevant stakeholders, including the media as well.
The question from Paul on the reduction of guarantees. As I explained, that the key 5 corporate plan initiatives we're looking at, one of those is the 105 billion reduction on the guarantees over the 2-year period. And what you are saying is that the loans that we have are guaranteed by government, but moving forward, and for the sustainability of the organization as well, is to start looking for unsecured loans. And I'd like Anush just to give details in terms of the thinking around the repayment of the guarantees. Because what it would mean is that whatever borrowings that will be targeting, we'll try and look at those that won't require government guarantees. And as such, then it will also help us to start releasing those that are going back to government. But I don't know, Anish, if you want to add anything else to that.
Sure. I think the funding strategy going forward, I think, is really to focus on alternative sources of funding, rather than where we've been targeting in the past. And the focus is really going to be on exploiting sources that would not require government guarantees. You will see that about 10% of our debt currently is sourced from export credit agencies. So one of the areas that we'll be looking to exploit over the next 5 years is how do we increase our use of export credit agencies, which obviously do not require, for example, the use of government guarantees. And that will be one of the strategies that we'll employ to release the 105 billion guarantees back to government.
Let's just cover the arbitration payment as well, as to by when and in what form.
I think the arbitration payment period is, I think, over the next 12 or 18 months, and I think about 250 or 300 million of that amount has already been paid. And I think there's another 12 or 18 months left relating to that.
Is that in the form of cash?
Yes, the balance of the payments will be in the form of cash as an offset against the coal price that is being delivered. And I think one of the reasons why that arrangement was entered into was the fact that the arbitrator had considered the fact that the organization has just come out of business rescue.
On the tariff application, I'd like the Eskom members to start working as well. They're all here. Okay, maybe let me ask you, let me abuse you.
Well, in that case, it's this Eskom member that has to respond to that. Mr. Chair, on the tariff application, yes, Terence, you're quite correct in that the 18-19 application is a 1-year application. So it doesn't include any of the RCAs. So it's a standalone application for 19%. In terms of the RCAs, just an update, you are also quite correct that the court has ruled in NERSA and Eskom's favor to be able to process the applications. We've also heard the intention of the hearing or the outcome of the court case to be appealed. We await that though. We haven't had anything official from that perspective. And the next RCA will probably be submitted by the end of July. And that will basically be in the region of about 23 billion. 23 billion. 23. 3. Yes, thank you. On the condemnation side, yes, the condemnation request has been submitted to NERSA. They've had public hearings in that regard. And we have submitted the information that we had promised that we would submit as part of the hearing. And that information has been submitted, I think, yesterday or the day before. So again, we will await NERSA's decision in that regard.
The question around the funding, as reported, this was last year, the 53%, and I know that when we were signing the $1.5 billion with the Development Bank of China, that's the 77% you're referring to. Yes,
so maybe I can clarify.
Yeah, it was 50, okay.
I think just in terms of the, I think there was a question that asked whether we have a cash shortage or not.
Yeah,
so I think,
but before that, yeah.
So the 53% and the 77%. The 53% is basically the funding that has been secured for the year. If you take the cash balances that are available plus the committed facilities that we have, and you add that to the 53%, you get to the 77%. So the 77% is the 53% which is signed and committed funding facilities, plus bank committed facilities of 6.5 billion, plus the cash on hand of about 20 billion.
In terms of the statement that we have on record, all three confirm that is Eskom in financial distress, the answer is an emphatic no.
As far as we are concerned with the financial statement that is presented to us and the financial statement up to date, we are financially sound and stable.
Must I comment? Must I comment?
Just to be on record.
Okay. Based on the information that we have available at our disposal at this point in time, I don't think we can classify Eskom as being in financial distress. And one of the key indicators that obviously we'd use to understand that is the recently published, will be released today, the annual financial statements, which includes the report of the external auditors, and you will see there they do not raise any going concern issues relating to Eskom. So from that perspective, I think that's also added comfort to the comments that have been made thus far.
Just checking, Paul, the questions around the, I think you were asking about the renewables, if you were covered there. Are you comfortable with, were you adequately covered with the information that was provided? Mr. Tata, if you can maybe just touch on that one, what our attitude is in relation to the renewables going forward.
Okay, can I ask David just to give details?
Thank you, Chief Executive. I'll give the latest feedback of where we stand with the renewables. Around middle of June, Eskom, together with the Department of Public Enterprises and DOE, was asked to appear before the Portfolio Committee on Energy. There was a joint presentation done by DOE on behalf of Eskom, and the presentation ended with basically 7 points of the way forward regarding the renewables. And there were quite a few actions. Of significance was that we had to wait for the IRP to basically come out around February 2018. We also had to look and see and develop programming, looking at the scale and the pace of rollout of renewables. part of the points was also that Eskom continue with their tariff application and also continue with the RCA applications. So those are the 7 points, some of the 7 points that was agreed to and that was presented to the portfolio committee. Obviously, the portfolio committee was not happy, but we said we needed to do those issues first before we consider signing them. Also of significance was the High Court judgment around the nuclear one in terms of Section 34. They had to go back now and see whether the Section 34 determination was actually applicable to any of the new renewables that's going to be rolled out as well. So that's where we stand at this stage.
Kulu, there's 2 questions that are still outstanding. I'd ask Anuj to cover that. One is that of are we in breach of our covenants, and also did the CFO mislead the public about the 2.1 billion?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. In terms of the question around the loan covenants, at this stage we are certainly not in breach of any of our loan covenants as we understand it. In terms of the question around did I mislead, or I think the question was when did I know about the facts? I got to know about the facts associated with the comments that are made now when, as Mr. Koza explained, that I needed to sign the arbitration agreement. So in making the appropriate inquiries to enable me to sign that agreement, this was when I got to know about the facts. In terms of the fact pattern that Mr. Molefe had when he made the statements, I'm not too sure. I can't comment on that.
Thank you, Chair. I noted Sikonati. Sorry, I'm going to limit myself to the side for now at least. Sikonati and then Desangelo, and after that it will be Antoinette. And then maybe the 4th one will be the lady in the middle here. We'll start with Sikonati.
Thank you. It's Sikonati Manchanja. I work for Business Day. Mr. Koza, you've just said you won't comment on the previous statements that Eskom does not have contracts with Trillion. Why not? Do you also not believe what Eskom says, like Lynn Brown? 1. 2, why must we believe what Eskom says now if you yourself won't comment on what Eskom has said, denying it has paid Trillion? Can you give us a proper update, sir, on the disciplinary hearing on Machela Koko? Exactly how far is it now? When will it be concluded? To Mr. Singh, about Mr. Singh, sir, it's still a question for you. You've just said 495 million rands was paid without invoice. And you've spent enough minutes explaining why there's anything to investigate against him. Where did you get that information if you have so much detail? And who decided there's nothing to investigate against him when all of these firms, McKinsey, SAP, and many others, have instituted investigations and they are the beneficiaries? Eskom is the victim of the thieving and the corruption that happened under his watch. How do you decide that Eskom has got nothing to investigate against the very same man who was part of those allegations? How does that stack up against your responsibilities, your fiduciary duties in the Companies Act? Have you considered that at all? Indeed, as a director, as your personal liability and the whole board? Another question, sir. Why Cliff Decker gave you its results, its opinion together with Nkonki on June 23, laying out all the charges. It's almost a month now. There's been nothing coming out of Eskom. Why is your board dragging its feet on Machela Koko? What does he have against on you and your board? Let's move on, sir.
Sikonati, if you can maybe just try to...
Are you going to come back?
Yes, just respect the protocol that we have. Yes.
You are going to come back?
We're going to come back to you, yeah. So
You're
if you
going to
can-
come back?
Yes.
Thank you.
If you can give the mic to Angelo on your left.
Angelo Coppola from China Global Television Network. On a lighter note, Soweto intrigues me. There's a 5-point-odd billion rand outstanding debt amount there. I'm looking at data from the end of 2017 for January, where the figure with interest is around 12 billion that's due, including interest, obviously. What's the plan here? You've already written off a whole bunch of money in 2003. You're also accommodating the Sowetans in terms of getting onto those meter systems, but you're still looking at a 5 billion rand debt. What's the plan?
Thank you, Angelo. We'll go for Antoinette.
Antoinette Slabbert from MoneyWeb. If I look at the booklet that we got, or the presentation, it's extremely flimsy in comparison with previous years. Why is it? Why is there a reduction in disclosure, seemingly? And then just yesterday, Minister Brown stated that Eskom is apparently not being truthful with her. Now, she's not here today. What should we read from that? Does she not support the results that are being released today, or what's going on? Even yesterday, her spokesperson still gave us the impression that she would be here today. So what is going on there? And then on the disclosure, there's nothing about bonuses in this presentation. Can you please, as the board, take us through the process of deciding on bonuses, and specifically the impact of the qualified financial statements, and also the significant transgressions of the PFMA on the decision about bonuses? And then what do you understand under the soft support that the Minister of Finance intimated that Eskom needs until next year when the new tariff increase kicks in? And do you believe it is necessary? The liquidity buffer, can you please tell us what the liquidity buffer is? And then on the expenses on your income statement, can you please help us to understand why net employee benefit expenses increased by 13%, what this impairment loss is that increased by 43%, and what the other expenses are and why they increased by 26%? Thank you.
Well, thank you, Antoinette. Just a reminder again to everyone, if you can just respect the protocol for 2 questions at least, we'll come back with another round. Lindley?
Lindley Donnelly from the Mail and Guardian. I just hope you can help me understand this. You've said on Mr. Molefe's pension package that it's a matter of legal processes now and you don't want to comment on this. But one of the auditing irregularities, Eskom has explained that one of the auditing irregularities raised had to do with Mr. Molefe's pension package, and it's ongoing because the fact is that it's part of a legal process. But this would suggest that your auditors don't think that that pension payment was regular or lawful, and at the same time, Eskom is, as far as I understand, in court arguing that it's all fine and dandy and there was justification for it. So could you please just explain what that doesn't chalk up for me? And then just one point of clarity, you said that you're fine and Eskom doesn't have any financial issues right now. So can you categorically state that in the medium-term budget policy statements or come October in the adjustments budget, Eskom won't be asking for any financial aid?
Thank you, Lindley. Well, management, that's a list for now. Well, in fact, we do also have other people on the chorus call, but that will follow after your responses. Mr. Dada.
I think on the question from Sekonati, that is to the chairman, chair. The first, I think there were quite a few. If you've noted them, otherwise I'll remind you. I think the first one is around a trillion.
Okay. As I've said initially, we did not have a contract with the trillion. The contract was with McKinsey. However, McKinsey wrote to the company as I'm informed, they say we must pay trillion directly. And hence, then we paid trillion directly. And the most questions that I've seen that were coming from most of them were parliamentary inquiry. They were asking whether we got any contract with McKinsey, and most of the questions they were answered negative. We did not have a contract. However, okay. If that statement maybe was issued, maybe it was incorrect, unless any of the executives that might have given can give me different.
Chair, if I may come in, Sigonat, the McKinsey and Trillion contract, which is why I said I've since asked for a review on that, because exactly the questions you're asking. The statement that was given came as a result of a parliamentary question that was given. And the answers given were, does Eskom have a contract with Trillion? And the answer given to that was no. And the reasons given was that the contract was with McKinsey. As to the question of did Eskom pay Trillion, the answer now given is after the principal contractor, which was McKinsey, had issued the letter to Eskom for a Trillion to be paid. That's how the payment was made. But all of this, given all of these different answers that we have, I've said I need to establish, for my own understanding and comfort, if there was a contract, who had the contract with who? If there were payments, what were the payments based on? If there was anything that was paid for, did Eskom derive any value out of it? Then you look at what the governance and all of, so that's the scope that we're looking into. Because I have to have comfort when you ask me that question next time to be able to answer you with full confidence. Pardon?
Are you also going to check who lied to the media and Parliament and said we did not pay a cent?
For now, the scope is based on me being able to even answer Parliament if I get asked the question.
You already answered, you said now someone lied. Are you going to check who authorized Kulu to lie to the media to fill 24 email and say we did not pay a cent? That is the question.
Yeah. Mr. Lala, before you respond, let me just ask that where possible, let's avoid dialogues like this, because you have other people who still need to have a chance. And most importantly, we're going to have another round where you are able to answer your questions. Mr. Lata, if you can elaborate on the questions that you were dealing with.
Okay, the update, Chair, on the COCO status.
As I said, on COCO matter, we received the report on the 23rd of June, and maybe if you recall, we had another report that we received on earlier than that, which was a draft report. Then we were engaged with them. And then the results to the report of the 23rd. The report on the 23rd does not explicitly indicate the charges that a person can be charged on. It was just the indication to say these are the issues. These are the issues because the issues were taking place within the family. They were not cross-examined. Therefore, they will need to be cross-examined. Then we went and looked for a legal opinion. Then the legal opinion then drafted to us the charges and the issues that we need to take into account for the judicial duties of the person holding that particular capacity within the organization, and also to look at the conflict, how the conflict emanates, and when, after you read the report, when the conflict was existing in different areas, what are the charges that are supposed to be put in place. Then once we got a legal opinion, then they drafted the charges. Then the audit committee were sitting last week, or even yesterday, they were sitting yesterday, just to confirm the charges. And now the charges have been drafted and they're going to be dispatched to him. And that's an update. The timelines is going to depend upon his availability and the availability of the chairperson to share the hearing. And you'll be kept posted on the development.
Anuj, if you could just answer the question. If I heard you correctly, this is the 495 million paid without an invoice. Sekonat, you asked the question of the 495 million paid without an invoice.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
I was asking the chairman, how on earth the person who authorized that payment is sitting here when all the other people that were party to that transaction on the other side are being investigated and have been suspended. You, Mr. Langa, just said now, electricity theft is high vehicle crime. Is half a billion not a high vehicle crime for Eskom?
Would you like to take care of that?
Okay. To my knowledge, there was an invoice that was submitted, and that I was given. I was informed that there was an invoice that was they paid against. I'm strange that you said there was no invoice, but the confirmation from the CFO is said there was an invoice.
Not long ago, Eskom said it did not pay a cent. Today there's an invoice. Yesterday there was no contract. Must I believe what Eskom said yesterday, or must I believe what you are saying today? That's my question, sir. How is it that Anuj Singh is sitting there on the 27th of December 2015? We've just heard now that in December he was in Dubai, and he has not denied that. But I'm coming for the next round. On the 27th of December, he signed a guarantee to ABSA to pay 1.6 billion rand so that Tegeta could acquire Optima. Eskom has previously said many times it paid no guarantees in order for Tegeta and the Guptas to be able to pay that. Then a few days later, Anuj Singh is reported to have been in Dubai on the account of the Guptas who are buying a company which is using Eskom's money to pay 1.6 billion rand guarantee. How did you arrive at that conclusion that there's nothing to investigate when he was sitting there in the office being in charge of that department, getting all the answers from him about what to investigate?
I don't know about the 1.6 billion. I don't know about it.
Chairman, before you answer, Sikonati, clearly you have a sort of a litany of questions. Some of them obviously for the next round you can answer, you can ask. But I'm sure also maybe after this briefing you would like to have a one-on-one with the chairman. So, but the ones that you have already asked so far, yes, I'm sure the chairman will be in a position to 100%, yes. And you can limit yourself to 2 of those questions that you have. The others you will ask after the session in a one-on-one briefing. Mr. Ladla and the chairman.
On the 1.6 billion, I've just asked Anuj to give us the details on that, the guarantee.
Mr. Chair, the guarantee was issued and cancelled subsequently. I said the guarantee that Mr. Manchancha refers to was a guarantee that was, I think, contemplated to be put in place. It was put in place and then subsequently expired and cancelled. So it was never utilized in any way, shape or form.
So there was a guarantee?
There was a guarantee that was put in place.
Eskom said there wasn't.
I'm not aware of the fact that we had issued a statement to say.
There's a lot of amnesia on the table.
Mr. Chair.
Yeah.
The matters in May, only in May, you said you did not pay a cent. Now, the chairman won't respond to that. Now you've forgotten or you are not aware of whether there were guarantees or not. And then you are happy to admit there was some guarantee. Did you or did you not sign a guarantee for Optima, to ABSA, to pay, for Tegeta, to pay for Optima?
The nature of the question to ask her was that, was there a guarantee? I said there was a guarantee in place The guarantee expired, it was never drawn on.
How do you compare that to what Brian Molefe said, that Eskom will not support or advance any guarantees for the Guptas to buy Optimum? You were the accounting officer. You signed the check on the guarantee on December 27th, 2015. Were you in Johannesburg or were you in Dubai when you made the signature?
Sikonato, let's give him a chance to answer. And you probably now have exhausted the questions that you wanted to ask.
No, I haven't, sir. It's the first round.
So let's give him a chance to answer, and then that next round you will ask the remaining questions. The others you will ask after the Q&A has ended. The CE and Mr. Singh, if you can take it from there.
Yeah, in terms of the Soweto debt, Ayanda, if you could just answer.
Thank you, Chair. I wish I could say that it was really on a lighter note, saying that it's 12 billion that we have to chase from Soweto. You will recall that we have written off debt in Soweto, I think about 2 or 3 times in the past. And what we have decided is that is not sustainable, because you can't write off and not have a technology that is going to stop us from bleeding. So what we are doing now is we are installing split metering. So it's a technology, I think we've spoken about it in terms of what type of technology it is. We have done about 1/3 of Soweto as I speak. The challenge is that on the ground, practically, we do have resistance. Just last week, in one township where we're trying to convert, we couldn't go in because of protests. And also, I think about a month ago or so, we also had another area, another township where we also had protests. But our strategy still remains. We will go into Soweto, we will install the split prepaid meters, and hopefully at the end of completing that program, which we would like to complete by the end of 2019, we will then look at the debt. We actually are going to start monitoring people in terms of payment levels. We have actually seen that people are starting to pay where we have converted. They are paying, and we'll look at those people, and then we'll consider what to do with the debt that they owe. And probably the write-off then will come with a permanent solution so that we don't go back to having to write off the debt in the future. I hope that answers the question.
That was Sis Ayanda Noah. She's responsible for customer service within the company.
Okay, on the question of the reduction of the presentation, these are just the slides. The annual results, the document, it's thicker than what you received. It will be online?
It will be online, Chair, yes.
Yeah. Why Minister Brown is not here? The shareholder rep normally don't attend our annual results. However, the Department of Public Enterprise officials are here. The question around the disclosure on bonuses, maybe if I could also ask Anuj to explain the modifiers that informs the bonuses.
Thank you, Johnny. The incentive bonuses, in terms of how they were calculated, the pool is based on financial performance. So it depends on the pool is generated through the financial performance. So you have EBITDA as the first gatekeeper, and the second gatekeeper was load shedding. I think it was 75% relating to EBITDA performance, 25% to load shedding. And then there's a second layer of modifiers that are applied. The second layer of modifiers that are applied relates to shareholder compact performance, qualified audit opinions, level of irregular expenditure, repeat audit findings, and the like. So that was applied, and I think the pool was modified by 15% for those elements. And then a third level of modifier is applied relating to each individual business unit performance. So, for example, on the qualification that we achieved was because of contract management and document management and so on and so forth. So the procurement area was the cause of that. So they then got a further 20% modifier as a business unit. And then the last layer of modifier that's applicable is individual performance. And that depends on our individual scorecards. And if we obviously do badly on our scorecards, then we are modified. If we do well, then obviously we're incentivized.
Thanks. The impact on the qualified statements, I'm not sure if you could just cover what has been done and the reports in terms of the impact. That was a question.
In terms of the
PFMA?
The PFMA. As I said, I think the qualification that we obtained in terms of the financial statements was not on the IFRS numbers. So the IFRS numbers are fairly presented in the financial statements. The audit qualification relates to PFMA disclosure in the financial statements, relating to note 52 of the financial statements, relating to irregular and fruitless and wasteful expenditure. The auditors were not able to confirm the completeness of that note due to contract management as well as document management and consequent management issues in the procurement processes. And that was the nature of the qualification, and that is why we have the qualification. The root cause of that qualification relates to the operating model that was implemented in 2012 relating to procurement, which we've now subsequently changing to be a more center-led operating model than what it was in the past. The SAP system that effectively was changed in 2014, I think it was, which didn't have the adequate amount of controls within it to be able to ensure that the procurement processes within the organization follow a systematic approach to controls. The resources in the environment also needs to be beefed up. And obviously the process around document management itself, in terms of the retention of documents, needs to be looked at and reviewed.
From Mail and Guardian, the question was around the irregularities on Mr. Molefe. Out of the two audit findings, one was closed and the one that was still open because the matter is still with the courts was that of Mr. Molefe. In terms of the justification on the 30 million, it's all part of the investigations that is going to be conducted, and that is the court to decide on that outcome.
Mr. Dladla, there's one question around from Antoinette about the soft loan that the Minister of Finance was talking about.
Oh, sorry. That was relating to the 2.2% tariff.
Sorry, in terms of the Minister of Finance comments, we are not aware of the reasoning behind the Minister of Finance's comments relating to the soft loan. We await National Treasury's communication in that regard. We certainly have not made a request for direct or indirect financial assistance for Eskom. However, you will recall that we did communicate in the past around our inability to sign the power purchase agreements, and that was as a result of the 2.2% tariff increase that we've got from NERSA in the current year. And we could only surmise that from an Eskom perspective that soft loan may be relating to the ability for Eskom to continue signing the power purchase agreements. But that's an assumption that we can make from our side.
Thank you, Chair. I'm going to discriminate against you and not take this round now. I'll take people who are on the chorus call. Did you have anyone on the line?
There are no questions on the line.
Thank you so much. This gives a chance for you to have a second buy. So. CE.
Thank you, BC. You want me to respond to this? Okay. The liquidity buffer has always been the same value. We haven't changed it in any way, shape, or form. The liquidity buffer is 20 billion. So we're quite well within that liquidity buffer. The increase in labor costs is as a result of the 8.5% increase in the wage bill that we've agreed with our unions, an increase in overtime. The overtime bill had increased, and then the incentives. The increase in the impairment loss is directly related to the increase in the accounts receivable or trade debtors, and that is the biggest component of that relates to the increase in the Munich debt. The other expense increase is related to an increase in the decommissioning provisions for certain of the mines. You will recall that we also had the issue associated with some of the contracts that we have that are coming up for expiry. And obviously, as these contracts come closer to expiry, we need to obviously provide for decommissioning costs and so on and so forth. So that decommissioning provision was actually increased.
All right, we will take possibly our last round now, because I'm told there's another group of people who are coming here after us. So as part of the stakeholder engagement that the CEO has mentioned. And before I give you the chance, let me note that I have deliberately discriminated against you, Mr. Ted Blom, for that specific reason. My boss tells me that there's an investor, or what do you call the stakeholder meeting, which is going to happen immediately hereafter, for which I think you've been invited or should be going there. This one, unfortunately, is mainly for the media, and that's for that reason. So if you don't mind, for them to have their chance. So I'm going to take people who had not asked for now, and then obviously I'll deal with other people. I'll take Chris Yelland on that side, and then I'll take, okay, we now have repeats. So after Chris, because we are still on that side, we'll go for Justin, and then we'll have Polly, and Susan next to you. We'll limit it to this round, and then we'll have a quick one after this one.
Good afternoon, Chris Yelland from EE Publishers. My first question is addressed to Mr. Khoza. As chairman, acting chairman of Eskom, what steps are you taking to deal with victimization of senior Eskom staff? In particular, I'm just mentioning one, Mr. Kulani Kauma, spokesman for the board and handling risk management, reputation management, sorry, for the board. He apparently reported to the board that Mr. Singh should resign and be removed from office. And since then, he is apparently being victimized. What steps are you taking in this regard, Mr. Khoza? My second question relates to renewable energy and the apparent 20 billion rand buffer referred to, liquidity buffer referred to by Mr. Singh. I've been asking for the last 8 weeks from Mr. Tava Govender as to what is the level of recovery of renewable energy expenses. And for 8 weeks, I've been ignored. No reply, no acknowledgement of receipt. And the reports have been from Mr. Koko and Mr. Malefi that renewable energy is costing Eskom a lot of money. When it now transpires that Eskom is profiting handsomely from renewable energy and has over-recovered some 7.6 billion rand, according to a report by my esteemed colleague, Terence Creamer, in the audience today. And this money is sitting in Eskom's bank account. And similarly, Eskom has profited handsomely and well done to them in the reduction of diesel costs that are directly related to renewable energy during the load shedding process amounting to 14 billion. In other words, Eskom is sitting with some 21 billion rand in its bank account, directly resulting from renewable energy. If it was not for this contribution by renewable energy, my question to Mr. Singh is, would that financial buffer have been exhausted, and would Eskom not be trading recklessly, illiquidly, and does not renewable energy save the day for Eskom? Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Justin, on your left, Chris. On your right.
Thank you. Just wanted to ask regarding the Finance Minister's comments. He didn't say soft loan, he actually said soft support, so it's rather unclear what he meant. So my question is, have you had any meetings with the Finance Minister and requested a soft loan, extension of your guarantees, cash injection, anything like that, that might have led him to include in his action plan of last week that you guys need some kind of soft support? And then the other thing I just wanted to find out is there's lots of probes going on by entities either at Eskom or outside Eskom or by the Minister. How many probes, if you don't mind listing, are there going on at Eskom related to corporate governance issues, corruption or alleged corruption, etc.? Thank you.
If you can pass it to Polly.
Thanks, Kulu. I'm Polly from Daily Maverick. Mr. Koza and Mr. Dladla and Mr. Sinch, I'm confused by this trillion situation. You're telling us that you didn't pick trillion up on your system. But any journalist here who has ever seen a tender document, and anyone in Eskom that has ever worked with tenders would know that you have to fill in the subcontractor. We actually have rules in South Africa about what the percentage of the subcontracting work may be. So now you tell us you didn't know that trillion was a subcontractor. So either you're telling us that the tender was corrupt, or that the controls were totally lax, or that you know nothing. That's kind of the options I see here. Please help me if I'm wrong here. Then I want to ask, Mr. Sinch, you fudged that question on the breakdown of the bonuses. I want to know how much you got, how much did Mr. Molefe got, how much did Mr. Koko get? How much did the table get in terms of bonuses? And that 97,000 Rand bonus in November 2016 that I wrote about on Monday, is that part of the bonuses that Sunday Times has written about? And then last thing, you're telling us that we have a growing surplus. Why do we need nuclear if we have a growing surplus? Why do we need a nuclear power station if we have a growing surplus?
Thank you. Susan?
Hi, Susan Comrie from the Amabungane Centre for Investigative Journalism. I just have a question about the reportable irregularities. There was a statement which has been, was released last week where Kulu had said that, that there were 2 reportable irregularities relating to Eskom, and that there was a 30-day period in which, the board has an opportunity to resolve those. And that they were resolved within the 30 days, and that they were deemed to be no longer continuing, which, as you know, is in terms of the IRBA's processes, is an official term that they use. I wrote to the IRBA, and they wrote back and they said, I'll read it to you because there just seems to be a miscommunication somewhere here. They said one of the RIs pertains to Rotec. We received the second report for the RI on Eskom Rotec on 29th of June, which indicates that the RI is continuing. They said that the RI was also continuing in relation to Mr. Molefe's matter, obviously. So if you can just clarify that point, was there a second report made by the auditors which said that on the other issue, not on the Molefe issue, that the irregularity was continuing, or does IRBA have the wrong information there? And perhaps you can just take us through what steps were taken, that the RI is now in your mind closed. And importantly, if you can take us through when those steps were taken, when the Rotec board was informed about the reportable irregularity, and when they took action. Thank you.
Thank you, Susan. Chair, if you can, Mr. Dladla, if you can take them. And then Sigonati, I have noted you, Lirane, we're going to have the last round where you will be able to answer or ask your questions. So leadership, if you can help us with the responses.
On the steps to deal with victimization of the employee staff, Chris, that's a question you had. I've just checked with the chairman. He's not aware of any victimization. You may just wish to share with us as to where is that coming from. The question around the renewable energy expenses, the buffer part, Deva.
Thank you, Chief Executive. I must say this with the greatest respect, Mr. Yelland. There's a protocol followed in terms of getting responses from Eskom. As group executives, we do not respond directly to journalists. It goes through the media desk.
The media desk didn't respond either, and I copied it to you.
Yes, so I think you need to take it up with the media desk and with Kulu why you did not get a response. Okay. In terms of the recovery of renewables, I think Arnold will add a bit on that, but from my recollection comes on from the time renewables came on in terms of the over-under recovery based on the budget from the regulator, I think we've been, 34 million rand basically underspent in terms of the recovery. I'm not sure of the exact numbers, but I don't know if Arnold wants to comment on that.
The claims that were referred to as well is the utterances from Machela and Brian, and then the reduction of costs on the primary energy costs linked to the benefits of the renewables.
I think certainly, thank you, Mr. Johnny. I think the issue associated with the renewable energy is relatively clear. If we look at the extent to which Eskom has benefited or not, I think it's a matter of public record. It is the amounts that actually are disclosed in our RCA applications, because the difference between what is allowed in the MYPD3 determination and what we actually spend is exactly the difference between what is the actual subsidy to which renewable energy provides to Eskom, or the other way around. In terms of the cumulative value of amounts that were allowed in terms of the MYPD3 applications and the amounts that have been spent to date on renewable energy, that is the program that is run by the Department of Energy. We are pretty much in a break-even situation. So whatever was allowed in terms of MYPD3 and what we spent cumulatively, we're in a break-even position. So we have not subsidized the renewable energy program, neither has the renewable energy subsidized us. In terms of the buffer being exhausted, as I just said, I don't think they subsidized us or we subsidized them in any way, shape, or form. The cash situation in the bank is a function of funding and amounts that you pay out. So that amount could be 0 tomorrow, or it could be 50 billion the next day, depending on what happens in terms of the funding environment. What you would want to see in terms of the questions that Mr. Yelland asked associated with profitability, that is, if you look at the cash representation of profitability, that is represented by EBITDA. And you can see EBITDA that we generated in the year increased by 14% year on year, and that was represented by cash generated from operations increasing by 23% year on year. So if you want to look at the amount of cash that's available to service debt and all the rest of it, it's coming out of operations. And as you can see that there is a commensurate increase with profitability and a commensurate increase with cash generated from operations. You would ask the question, why is that the case? The reason for that is because, as Mr. Yelland said, one of the reasons was that we had successfully decreased the use of diesel, which was 8 billion rand per annum, $1 billion rand per month. The second reason that we've actually been able to generate such healthy profits in the year, as measured by EBITDA, was because we significantly reduced the cost of coal. Now, the cost of coal, as you would know, has increased significantly over the last 5 years. And if you look at the rand per ton 5 years ago, it was 190 rand a ton. As of last year, which is financial year 16, it had increased to 380 rand a ton. So that's a 100% increase in the cost of coal over the 5-year period. From last year to this year, the cost of coal has increased from 380 to 393 rand a ton, which is a 3.4% increase only. So if you want to ask where the profitability is coming from, it's certainly not coming from Eskom managing IPP contracts properly. It's coming from the fact that we're actually extracting efficiencies from the business. Who's hurting in this process? Obviously, suppliers and coal suppliers are hurting tremendously in this process. Why did the cost of coal increase as dramatically as it did? It was a poor performance of the cost-plus mines. And that is direct. You can see it. It was a 135% increase over the 5-year period. From 165 rand a ton to 389 rand a ton. Cost-plus mines over the last year increased from 389 rand a ton to 373 rand a ton, which is a negative 4% increase year on year. Fixed price contracts increased 106% over 5 years. The year-on-year increase from last year to this year is 4%. So when we ask the question, what have we done in the organization that's different? That is what we've done in the organization that's different. That's yielding these results. If we continue on this trajectory, you will find that we will not have a financial crisis because it's real cash that we're actually generating out of the organization. Do we require tariff increases? Yes, we still require tariff increases. Do we still need to extract more efficiency from the business? Yes, we still do need to. And we will continue to do so.
On the question of how many probes are at Eskom, that I know of is what the minister announced with the SIU. So that's one. The other one is the parliamentary inquiries, which is scheduled for August. From time to time, we do get also requests from the Hawks on different matters. So that is, I would say, another probe that we get. Those are the only ones that I'm aware of. The question around trillion procurement, Daily Maverick, can I beg for your indulgence that the process I'm going through now, it will give me comfort in giving you answers so that you don't come back and say, this is what you said, now this is what you're saying. So as soon as that process is completed, I will have comfort in giving you answers. And I do commit to that. In terms of the breakdown on bonuses, when the financials are given, the financial statement, you'll be able to see the disclosure of the bonuses in the document. Pardon? It's on the website. But that is disclosed.
No, on the Eskom, there's a whole report, please. We couldn't, I mean, you would recall there was a time where Parliament used to ask clear questions. How much did you spend on your annual report copies? So we have not taken anything out of the copy. If you go on our website, you get all the information that will be tabled in Parliament in September. All of it, please. Bear with us, we could not print as many. You know, there's also a treasury regulations that determine how much should we spend on, they call this marketing documents on a few. But just now, go onto there, you will get the information, please.
I think in the interest of time, it will even give you more information that you require. There's 3 individuals you've mentioned, there's a whole list of them in the document. So if you just access the site, you'll get that information. Okay. The question around why nuclear, if you've got enough capacity, where is David? Dave.
I think it's Dave Nichols, Chief Nuclear Officer. I think it's a question of timing. We are looking at the prospect going forward into the next 20, 30 years in a low carbon environment. We do not see the entire demand being met by renewables because of storage constraints, which are going to limit them in the years to come. And therefore you need to have some dispatchable option. And as far as we're concerned, at the moment in this country, we have no natural gas at the moment, and that is a carbon source. We have coal, that is a carbon source. We end up with large hydro or nuclear. We have no large hydro. So the nuclear option going forward 10, 15 years in the future is very real. Clearly, we do not need a new nuclear power station next year, but if we start now, we will get one in about 2027, probably about 10-year lead time. Eskom's current position is that we are ready to launch the nuclear program when we are so instructed by government to do so under the IRP. We look forward to the government instruction on that. The previous one we issued a Section 34 determination last December, and as you know, that was overturned in the courts because of concerns at government process. We look forward to what will not come from government.
The last question was around the reportable irregularities, Amapungani. The two matters was one on impulse, which was linked to Mr. Koko, and the other one was on Mr. Molefe. Regarding impulse matter, the auditors were satisfied within the 30 days of the actions that have been taken so that there's no continuation of it. Rotec Industries is a subsidiary of Eskom. Why it was reported separately is because of it's got its own board. The matter was the same because it was on impulse. So within the subsidiaries, the proactively checked because they worked on the Eskom assets if impulse was given any work. So there were two transactions that were reported proactively by Rotec, and the auditors were satisfied that within the 30 days that was given, that there was no continuation of that. The board of Eskom Enterprise was also advised, the chairman did give confirmation to the auditors, SNG, and they wrote back to say that they were happy with their responses and management actions around that. There were individuals that were identified in terms of disciplinary, so the consequences that were assigned to the irregularity was also actioned.
Thank you so much, Mr. Dladla. Well, ladies and gentlemen, we've been sitting here, it is me standing, for 2 hours now. If we were flying to Cape Town, we'd have possibly be arriving now. So we're going to take the last tranche of questions now, if you don't mind, because I'm told the other people who were invited for the other session are already outside. So I'll give a chance to Carol, and then Philip, and then Sikonati, and then I see Joy. Yeah, so those will be the last question, if you don't mind. What was the question again? Soft support. Okay, we'll add that one to the list. So this will be the final round. Yeah, if you can start with you, Carol.
Thanks very much. Yes, my question is actually on that issue of the soft support. Mr. Singh, are you saying that we're not going to hear at the medium-term budget policy statement or anytime soon that there is some kind of syndicated loan or something being given to Eskom by government because it's in financial distress? Was Malusi Gigaba, the finance minister, talking, through his hat? I'm not sure how to make sense of these two very contradictory things. And then secondly, on the financial performance generally, so you use the EBITDA as this great indicator, but in a company that's got so much debt, the EBITDA is not really a very good indicator. So it's easy to use that to see, to award yourselves bonuses. But in fact, the profit has plunged. And so my question is, are the results really as good as you say they are? And how do you explain that enormous drop in profits and the enormous rise in interest costs? Thanks.
Thank you, Carol. Sikonati, if you don't mind, Philip, after Sikonati, yeah.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Two questions, if you don't mind.
Well,
the others you'll ask afterwards.
7.
Two questions.
She asked 7. Be that as it may. Mr. Koza, can you tell all of us on the record that you have never accepted or taken a gift or a bribe from anybody? Can you do the same, Mr. Lala? Please do the same, Mr. Singh. Have you ever taken a gift or a bribe from anyone? 2, Mr. Lala, you've already suspended McKinsey for the contract that for the 500 million rand contract that went to trillion. There were 3 parties to that transaction. One of them is sitting to your left-hand side. Why have you not suspended him? Mr. Koza, did you or did you not know that Anuj Singh was taking gifts or inducements, or call it what you will, the trips that Amapungane mentioned and that are in the Gupta emails, with a supplier of Eskom? If you did, is that proper and above board? If not, what are you doing about it? Did you know that Anuj Singh on December 27 signed a guarantee for Tegeta to buy Optimum of 1.6 billion rand, which he just admitted now? As chairman of the board tender committee, and indeed as the director of this company, did you or did you not know of that? If you did, please reconcile that with Brian Molife's statement standing here that they will not support Tegeta in any way financially to acquire Optimum. Thank you.
Thank you, Sikonati. Philip?
Philip de Wet from the Mail and Guardian. Mr. Singh, you'll have to excuse me, the calculations are a bit back of envelope because we weren't provided with the annual financial statements before this Q&A session. In the last financial year, if I annualize that number, you received 15,000 Rand for telephone and car allowance. This year that number is 522,000 Rand. Can you just tell us why that rather large increase? It also increased as a percentage of the total. It does seem anomalous. And then your bonus of 1.9 million Rand, are you comfortable with that bonus, given all these questions, given the decline in profit? Do you feel that you deserve that bonus? Will you be taking that up? Thank you.
Thank you, Philip. Before Joy speaks, I'm told the hard copies of the annual report are actually outside. So as a backup to accessing them online, you can also have copies after this session. Joy?
Joy Summers, Carte Blanche. I just wondered if there is any status update on the closure of the power stations, any time frames and how many power stations it would be.
Thank you, Joy. Mr. Lala.
Mr. Koza, the question is, have you ever accepted bribe or got any gift? On record, if you could state.
On record, I haven't accepted any bribe or gift from anyone. Thank you.
Okay, on and off the record, I've never accepted any bribe from anybody. And I would like that if there's anybody who's ever given me any bribe, this is televised. If they could please forward that information. As to the gift, what sort of gift are you referring to, Sikonati? Maybe I work for Eskom, so if the gifts you are relating to, it's gifts that I received at work. Is that what you are referring to? Well, I don't even know how Dubai looks like. So if you check with the Home Affairs and check if Mrs. Lala has ever been to Dubai, you owe it to these people to tell them when was I in Dubai.
Thank you, sir. I noted your answer.
Thank you, sir. I can go on record and say that I have not received a bribe of any sort or taken a bribe from anybody. I think as it relates to the gifts, as I said to you before, I will be submitting a tell-all document. So let's just wait for that, and then we will see where that lands up. Thank you.
The question around soft loan, if we've made any trips or had any meetings with the minister around that.
I think as I explained, I think in terms of the comments from the minister, I think he'll have to clarify the comments that he's made. In terms of Eskom's position, Eskom has not made a formal application or had any formal meetings with Treasury associated with any form of support that is required for Eskom as an entity. As I said, the second point was that we did approach National Treasury to provide us with some sort of relief, given the government support framework agreement, and given the pronouncement by the President in the State of Nation address to say we should sign IPP or PPAs going forward. That was the approach that we had made to facilitate the unblocking of the impasse relating to the PPAs. In terms of going forward, in terms of financial distress and so on and so forth, I think it's common cause that we are currently in a net borrowing position, and our ability to continue as a going concern is premised on the basis that we have access to debt capital markets. If something had to happen catastrophic tomorrow that limits our access to the debt capital markets, which we're not aware of currently, then obviously we'd need to approach Treasury. So at this point in time, I don't think there is anything that would be a cause for concern for us to be approaching National Treasury on current circumstances and current information available to us.
No financial distress, that's what you've just explained. In terms of the measure, EBITDA versus measuring profits?
Yes, I think again, on the EBITDA as a performance measure, I think if you look at all major rating agencies, there's not many of them that actually look at profitability of a company at a net profit level. And that is because of the fact that items like depreciation and some interest costs are non-cash. Sometimes tax relating to deferred tax is non-cash. So they look at EBITDA and they look at a multiple of EBITDA to debt as an indicator of whether an organization has the ability to repay debts in the long term. Even if you look at interest, for example, they don't look at interest that's in the income statement, but they look at cash interest coverage ratios. So that is one of the reasons why we look at EBITDA and our ability to generate EBITDA. And as I explained before, EBITDA is a very good indicator of cash profitability, which is cash generated from operations. So if you are growing EBITDA, you are certainly growing cash generated from operations equally. In terms of explaining the reduction in profit, yes, I think there has been a decrease in profit. It is not unexpected. So it is within the plans of Eskom to see this reduction in profitability. And the reason for that reduction in profitability is because of the fact that we have brought in new assets, being all the units that we spoke about on Medupi and Kusile. Those assets that come on stream obviously come on stream at a much higher asset value than the old assets. And therefore you see this increase in depreciation, firstly, because of the quantum of new assets, and then the value of those new assets. Similarly, on the interest side, under IFRS, you are allowed to capitalize certain interest costs during the period of construction. As soon as those assets stop being constructed, that asset is those interest costs are no more required to be capitalized, but need to be expensed, and that is why you see the increase in the interest cost line. However, again, if you look at the calculation of cash interest cover, those interest costs that are actually capitalized are included in that cash interest cover definition. So from that perspective, the ratios that you see there, that is why you don't see a sharp decrease in the cash interest cover calculation, because it's always been in that number.
The question to yourself, Chairman, in terms of did you know about the 1.6 billion guarantee, and if so, what happened?
Okay, the first one I think comes up there is that we were aware of the trips. Yes, we were only informed, we only know it through the media, and we did afford Mr. Singh an opportunity to answer, as he indicated now to say he's going to answer on us, because we did debate it at the board level. The 1.6 billion I don't recall, but I will then investigate it because I don't recall. The Brian statement as well, and I can't comment on it now because I don't recall the other one.
So you don't recall these things?
I didn't recall the 1.6 billion.
And you actually are the chairman of the bank still right in front of you.
I think at the moment, as you asked the question now, I only heard it for the first time when you asked the questions. But I will go and investigate that.
You heard it for the first time, 1.6 billion. Yes or no?
That's what I said.
Yeah.
And we are the chairman of the board tender committee.
Sikonati, maybe some of this you can take offline with the chair after this session. Ms. Ladlala?
On the increase, the 522,000 that has just been picked up.
Thank you, Johnny. I'm not aware of the details of the 522, but we can look into that and give you a response around the increase in the expenses. In terms of the question around my incentive bonus, I think, yes, certainly I'm relatively comfortable with the value of the incentive bonus. If you look at the turnaround of the organization, a big portion of the turnaround of the organization was spearheaded by the group finance function, which was under my leadership and control. So from that perspective, I think we all, as the whole EXCO team, as well as the rest of the organization that has participated in the incentive bonus scheme, deserve the incentive bonus that was awarded to them.
The question from Carte Blanche on the closure of power stations is Willie here. Willie?
Thank you. Can I ask for the question to be repeated, just to make sure that I'm answering the question correctly?
I just wanted to know what is the current status or plans by Eskom to close down the power stations? How many power stations, which ones, and what time frames?
Okay, thank you. Look, let me summarize like this. Although that previously statements were made publicly that power stations are going to shut down, the fact of the matter is there is no board resolution that says we're going to shut down any power stations. So therefore, as I speak right now, we are not even debating any plans. There's no board resolution on the shutdown of power stations. Thank you.
That gentleman who just spoke is Mr. Willie Majola. He's the acting group executive for generation. He looks after power stations.
Okay.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, that brings us to the end of this marathon briefing.
Okay.
And that will be the end of it. Sikonati, anything?
Wait first. We call that the time is 1:30. And a number of you had asked for one-on-one interviews. And they had asked for a time after 11 o'clock. Because remember, this was supposed to be from 11 to 12. And a number of you asked for interviews between that time with the Chief Executive Officer. Please do know that that time is not here now anymore because they have only about 20 minutes to refresh and come back to, and we will try to rearrange. But between now and 4 o'clock, it will be almost impossible for the Chief Executive Officer and team to be able to have an interview because they have 20, in fact, it's now only 15 minutes between now and the next event. We apologize for any inconvenience that will cause to you. Thank you very much.
Oh, sorry. Sorry,
sorry, I missed that.